Welcome back to the Financial Microphone. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Monopoly game and lessons that we can learn from it that can be applied in real life. 5 in particular. And for those who have never played Monopoly before, the goal of the game is to be the last player standing with money. The way you win in Monopoly is by collecting rents on property or cash flow. Much like in real life, in Monopoly, you cannot win with the collection of the free $200 if you've seen this on the board game, which resembles our job passing through it. You collect your check, but that is not the way you can win in the game or in real life. So, let's go ahead and get started and start with number 1. Lesson number 1 is be patient. This is important in the board game because the game can be very long. People can go collecting money for hours. You can play the game for many hours, going back and forth until finally there's one player standing. Now the same can be applied to real life because patience is key when trying to both collect money and become wealthy. This is because it's not going to happen overnight. And on top of that, sometimes it can be a case of taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or you might be collecting money in a shorter way because you may not be making a lot, so it's going to take you a long time to get to where you want to be. And if you don't have patience, you'll start doing things that will backtrack you even more than you should be going, and patience is just something that's going to be required of everyone. If and when you decide to actually go along this journey to become wealthy, you must also remember that patience is going to be your best friend. Lesson number 2 that can be learned from the Monopoly game and applied to real life is focus on cash flow. This is true in the game because if you are familiar with the board game itself, then you know that one of the areas that you pass through on the board, it's called Go. It says collect $200 salary as you pass. Now this can be the equivalent of having a job in real life, because in the board game, every time you go around the board, you're gonna pass that and you get free $200 no matter what, as long as you pass through that. So you can basically say that's like your job. Every 2 weeks, every week, every month, however often you get paid, although it's not free, but you could call it going around the rat race map. It's like, that's why it's called a rat race. You go around it and you collect your paycheck, whether it's $200 as in the game or $2,000 or whatever it may be. And the point of this is to say that, like in the game, you can pass that, but you're never going to win the game by focusing on, oh, let me just collect those free $200. I know I'm going to pass that. I'm going to go through there and I'm going to get that money. You're never going to win the game that way. Much like in real life, you're not going to win the game of life by just collecting your paycheck that you work for and then you collect it every 2 weeks, let's say. Much like in the game, you must have cash flow. And one of the best ways to do that in real life is collecting rental property cash flow. You know, apart from your own housing, providing housing for others is going to be a way for you to collect rent or buildings, offices, apartments. Building wealth that way is the key, both to win the game of Monopoly and to win the game of life. Focus on cash flow instead of your active income create passive income. Lesson number 3 from the Monopoly game to be applied in real life. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Meaning, do not put everything that you own, everything that you earn, any and all of your resources should not be going to one source. So this is a proverb that goes way back. You should not concentrate all of your efforts and resources in one area, as you could lose everything. This is very important in the Monopoly game as well, because if you focus on, for example, just getting one piece of the board game, right? You don't want to diversify. It could be maybe a potentially good strategy at the beginning of the game, but as you go through the game, other players start collecting other resources, focusing on diversifying. They will eventually have more properties than you, and as you pass through their areas, you will have to pay more money as you go. Whereas you may just have 1, 2, or 3 areas, and they may have a lot. You may be collecting a lot of rent from those players the times that they do pass by your properties. But overall, you're not going to win the game, which is the point of the game and the point of life. It's a very important lesson, and that can go on anything. If you're focusing on just focusing on buying one particular stock, if that stock crashes and you just lost everything that you put in that. But it can be applied to many things in real life. Like, don't focus on having just necessarily one job, as in one source of income, because if that source of income, if it is your job, if you lose your job, you now lose your way of making money. So as I stated in one of my previous videos, the average millionaire has about 7 income sources, which helps them be millionaires, not only because they have 7 income sources, they're collecting money in more than just one way, but if any of those were to fail, any one of those, or any 2 of those, or 3 of those, whatever the case may be, they still have, other income sources to fall back on. And, that's just a common sense thing that can help you get far in life. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Lesson number 4 from the Monopoly game is that the most expensive asset is not always the best asset. So in the Monopoly game, one of the most expensive properties that you can own is called the Boardwalk. And now it costs $400 in Monopoly money. And so yes, it is an expensive piece to collect, but it is not always it's not necessarily the most buck for your bang as far as return goes. There's other pieces that you can own of property in the game that are going to yield you a much better return. And so the same thing can be said about real life, and just it can also go for properties, but it can go for products as well. The saying goes is, typically when a brand is superior in quality, you would think it'd be more expensive. And yes, this can be true, but at the same time, a good indicator of product quality is not always its price, because you can find cheaper items that are built of great quality, and then sometimes you can buy something that's very expensive. Take clothing, for example. There's many clothes brands out there that are very expensive. You can get the real top designer clothing like Gucci or something along those lines, that you're paying for basically the name. And not to say necessarily that the quality is bad, of the clothing. It may last you for years, but for the price that you're paying, you could get some other brand, maybe not a well-known brand, that could be the same quality and not be as expensive. So when it comes to real estate, you know, sometimes you might run across a house that you might want to purchase and put for rent, and you figure it's very expensive, and so you go and you buy it, but it ends up being not necessarily the best location, for example, and you find it difficult to get tenants to rent it out because of the location or because of its surroundings, because of something inherently wrong with the house, but you may not have caught at the beginning. But either way, the lesson is that don't always go by the price of something. Don't judge the quality by the price, both by its how expensive it is or how inexpensive it is. Lesson number 5 from the Monopoly game that can be applied in real life. This is probably the most important in my opinion, is just to always keep cash on hand. And that can be, in the game, sometimes it can be one of the most difficult things to accomplish, because as you run across each piece that you land on, sometimes there can be a tendency to want to just buy every piece that you land on, right? Because you think the more pieces you have of property in the game, you know, obviously the more chances you have of your opponents landing on those pieces, which then, you know, in return means you collect more rental property income that way. And while this is true, at the same time you could spread yourself very thin, and you know, just like those other players are going around the board and paying off the money that they owe to those you know, landlords, you yourself still have to go through that as well. And as you land on other players' pieces, you have to pay them. And so you have to really gauge how much money you have, and you always want to keep cash on hand so that you can still pay the other players, or else you're going to lose the game. And the very same thing is, it can be applied and should be applied, that mentality, to real life. You know, as you go around, even if you don't have rental properties, even much more of a reason to think this way is if you just have your job to depend on, and if you collect a check and you spend the check and you're left with zero, you know, it can be very easy to want to buy things and even use a credit card to put things that way, because it's easy to just use a credit card, and you know, it's like you're buying something in advance before you even have the money, which is even worse. But even if you just buy everything cash, you always want to have cash on hand, just because an emergency can come up, and something always comes up. Even if it's not an emergency, maybe, you know, if you're a family man or woman, you have kids' birthday parties, or even just a relative, you got to buy a gift. Or even if your life is perfect, someone else might be in distress and they may need a hand on, you know, they might need some money from you, and you want to be able to help them as well. So it's just very important to always keep cash on hand, because in real life, it's a lot worse in the Monopoly game. You lose the game in real life, you go bankrupt, which really affects, you know, everything financially for you. It's difficult even getting credit, getting a loan to then be able to get a car, which you might, you know, need to go to work, or to be able to get a property for yourself and property to put out for rent. So always keep cash on hand. In closing of this video, I want to leave you with some words from Robert Kiyosaki, as you see him here on my thumbnail and in the background of this video. The reason I included him is because a lot of people know him. If you know anything about him, if you read his books, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he mentions the game Monopoly. And basically that was one of his teachers, was the game, and his Rich Dad which allowed him to build his wealth as he grew older. You know, a lot of people think because, you know, you're told by your parents and society to go to school, get good grades, and get a good job, that is the recipe for success in life. And as he put it, Monopoly is the formula for great wealth. So most of us know how to play the game, right? You know, you have 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel, and you collect as many properties as possible. But the thing is, we don't take these lessons and apply them to real life. And as you just saw in this video, I gave you 5 lessons here that you can apply to real life today. And they are very strong, very powerful lessons, and they really do work. They are true lessons. You know, to be successful in the game is one thing, in the game of Monopoly, but to be successful in the game of life, these lessons, as crazy as it may seem, can be applied. And, you know, do your own research, go deep into this. There's more than these just 5 lessons that I gave you here. There's a lot more things you can learn from this game. So thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, and see you guys on the next video.